Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of PowerCore Productions. And today, we're going to be starting another new series here on the channel as we continue with Anime Marvel Phase 3, Part 1. And we're going to be starting with a new series in The Rising of the Shield Hero, The Man Out of Time. What if Captain America was the Shield Hero? Season 1, Part 1. As always, if you're new to the channel or if you're already subscribed and like what we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can always stay up to date on every new series that's coming out now and in the future. Safe to say, I'm looking forward to making this story. It's been on the back burner for a while now because it's gone through a lot of rewrites, a lot of drafts, because I really wanted to try to get the feel of this story and what I was trying to go for, who I wanted to use and how I wanted to use them. And after a lot of work, I think it's finally come together. So I'm happy to get this series out. It's going to be one of our new series coming out now. So I really hope you'll enjoy everything that goes with it. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into today's video. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. "1945. That was as far back as he could go. He remembered vaguely what had happened. He was flying a large aircraft created by an evil organization, Hydra, spearheaded by the mastermind known as the Red Skull. Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, fighting valiantly to save his country and the world, crashed the ship into the Arctic Sea in order to avoid a worser fate. But you all know that story. You've probably heard it over 100 times. And you probably think you know where this story is going to end, but the funny thing about a story is that you never know when the twist or the turn will occur. And for this story, it takes a hell of a twist. For Steve, it was instantaneous. When you feel like you're about to meet death's door, it's said that you can have your life flash before your eyes, but sometimes your past can as well. For Steve, he always thought that his life wasn't going to amount to much. A scrawny boy from Brooklyn, didn't have much to his name. His parents died when he was young. All he had in this world was his best friend and his unyielding desire to do what was right. And even back then, that was considered, in a way, old-fashioned. A time when you did as you were told, following orders, being a good soldier, doing for your fellow man. Those were the ideals that he strived by, even if the world didn't seem to want to agree with them. Not just on enemy lines, but even at the home front. There were those that had the perceptions of what a hero should be, what truly made a man. But it wasn't just the strength, the skills, the accolades. It was what was on the inside. That is what truly defined a man. For Steve, he simply tried to live up to the ideals that he aspired to. He wasn't perfect, he had his faults, even if many would disagree. He remembered reading a story. It was a long time ago. It was from some bookshop in New York. A tale of 4 heroes. One that had a sword, one had a bow, one had a spear. And funnily enough, he never got to the part with the 4th hero, one of whom he took a lot of inspiration from, the Shield Hero. Of course, at first glance, no one ever thinks much of a shield. But a shield can be quite handy. A shield is perfect for defense, and sometimes defense makes the best offense. But you never value the protection of a shield until you don't have one. When a natural disaster strikes, you're not looking for a weapon to fight the petulant winds, the rains, the storms, the hails. No, in your hour of need, you find shelter, because that shelter shields you. It protects you. In a world that only seemed to value chaos and destruction, sometimes finding that peace and stability in protection was hard to come by. But for Steve, it was something that he embodied. It was hope. Steve found himself waking on the floor. He wasn't sure where he was or how he had gotten to this location. He felt something on the side of his arm. It was a shield, but not his own. It was shaped like a pentagon. It was gray with a glowing green gem in the center, and it couldn't come off. What the? Where's my shield? This isn't mine. Where the hell am I? It quickly dawned on him that he wasn't alone in this endeavor, as there were others along with him. 3 other young men. One blonde with a ponytail, one with short-cut brown hair, and another one with his hair down in black. Steve didn't recognize any of these boys, but these boys, while they were also perturbed, recognized him. No way. It can't be. Are you kidding me? How is he here of all things? Huh? You know me? Know you? You're Captain America, the boy with black hair would say. How do you... You're a hero. I mean, who wouldn't know you? I mean, I'm just surprised that you're here. Last time I heard, you were in the grave. In the grave? I'm sorry, but I don't know who any of you are. Well, it's not like we've ever met you before, the boy with black hair would say. The name's Ren Amaki, 18 years old. My name's Itsuki Kawasumi. I'm 19 years old. My name's Motoyasu Kitahara. I'm 23 years old. Right. I'm, Steve Rogers, Captain America. But I mean, you all know that, apparently. 26. 26? Looks pretty old for a 26. Yeah, but being a hero would do that to you, Itsuki would say. Hero. So, you guys know me, or at least you know of me. Before they could continue the conversation, the door would open. People dressed in various robe and garb would welcome them as the 4 cardinal heroes, the heroes who would save their world from catastrophe. There was little time and little for introduction. Of course, Steve, trying to make sense of what was going on, the other 3 boys quickly ignored their star-strucken awe at meeting a legendary hero as they took hold of the situation, explaining that they weren't going to be doing anything for free, and if they were brought here against their will, they expected to be compensated. Of course, Steve was a little put off by the fact that the boys, who seemingly had no idea what was going on, suddenly started barking and making demands. I mean, it wasn't really the polite thing to do, but in the end, Steve only had his focuses on trying to figure out where he was and how he was going to get home. All the same, the 4 would be introduced to the king, one known as Alcrate Melremark, the 32nd. The king would take note of each hero as they introduced themselves. before explaining to them the situation at hand. They were the four cardinal heroes who were summoned to fight the waves of catastrophe, stopping an event known as the incursions. Across the land in each kingdom there held a special artifact known as the Dragon Hourglass. This hourglass would tell the coming of the next wave of catastrophe, the next incursion. Of course, if the situation wasn't dire, then they would have waited, but the next incursion was going to occur in a month's time. As such, they were in need, and they summoned the four heroes for it. Steve was a little put off by the fact that the king, even if not outright, seemed to almost disregard him. Of course, the king had to take note of the shield hero in particular. He wasn't like the others. He was all uniform, professional. He had the true hallmarks of a soldier. Of course, for Steve, he had no idea how any of this worked, even when Ren was trying to explain to them that this was a lot like a game. It was a lot like a RPG, MMO, something along those lines. They were informed that what they had was status magic. Steve, being surprised to see something out of the corner of his eye, his stats, how all of it functioned. Of course, the others simply shook their head. This was Captain America they were dealing with, literally the man out of time. So it was only natural he'd be out of touch with things like this, but still, they thought he would have become more acclimated by this point. Safe to say, the boys spent most of that evening explaining to Steve how all of it worked. They had to use simple, basic terms and had to repeat things over and over again. But thankfully, to his credit, Steve was a fast learner and diligent, so it didn't take him too long to get the hang of things, even if he didn't fully understand the concept of a video game or things of that nature. But then again, he was fighting against evil Hydra German Nazi scientists who had magical cubes and other sorts of devices with means of taking over the entire world, so something like this was entirely tame. But at the same time, a conversation had to be held. As the four of them were taken to a private quarters for that evening, the boys had a lot of questions. For Ren and for Motoyasu, they only had one similar question. How in the hell are you still alive? I mean, I'm right here. Okay, time out. Let's try to get this in order, Steve would say. So you all know of me, but I don't know of you. It seems about the gist of it, Itsuki would say. All right then, so how exactly do you all know me? Ren, you first. Okay. You are Steve Rogers. From the United States. You're a superhero, Captain America. You went into the ice in 1945, and you came out in 1963. Wait, what? Motoyasu would ask. 63? I'm sorry, but your time's way off. He didn't come out in 63. What are you talking about? I read it in a book. It says he went under in 1945. He came out in 1963. Now, I'm going to be taking a pause here into the story to explain some of the references with each hero. The reason why Ren has the year 1963 is because in our time, Captain America officially made his re-debut in Marvel Comics in 1963 in Avengers issue number 4 of 1963. Because if you'll remember, Captain America was originally a comic in the 1940s during the events of World War II, but following the end of World War II, when the original comic line that had Captain America, the original Human Torch, and the Submariner went under, his comic was discontinued. However, when Marvel was relaunched in what you might call the Silver Age in the 1960s, Captain America was reintroduced into Marvel Comics in 1963. Thus, this is the actual universe that Ren comes from, that said comic universe. The universe where Captain America came back into the world in 1963. Motoyasu was greatly confused. No, Cap came back in like 1990 something or early 2000s, something along those lines. But that doesn't sound right with mine, Ren would say. You're both wrong because he's still alive. He's still alive? Of course, along with he and the other Avengers. They're still alive. He came back in 2002. Wait, how did yours die? Itsuki would ask Ren. He died of natural old age. I want to say around the late 2010s, something like that. He was close to 90 or 100 years old when he finally passed. Finally aged out and died. What about you, Motoyasu? He got shot in front of the Senate building. What? Yeah, wait. You guys didn't have that civil war? Civil war? What war? Itsuki and Ren were shocked to hear about this war. Wait, you guys don't know about the Civil War? It was this thing that happened in the United States. So there were these young heroes, right? To make a long story short, they were fighting this bad guy. I think it was Neutron, something like that. He blew himself up and blew up all these buildings. Like a lot of people died, including some kids. Because of that, legislation got passed in the United States, causing for the Superhuman Registration Act. Cap was against the order, so he led a team of heroes as a resistance against the registration. Captain America had to fight against Iron Man. What? Tony Stark? A Stark? Steve would say. I fought a Stark. Are you serious? You don't know who Tony Stark is? I know who Howard Stark is. His father. Wait, Howard has a son? Of course he does. He's Iron Man. Tony Stark? You don't know this? You fought him, Motoyasu would say. But I didn't fight him. Anyway, there was this battle between the two heroes in New York. It was crazy. It was being live streamed like around the world, which is crazy given that during that time, live streaming was still a new thing. But still, it was being broadcast. And anyway, Cap's side lost. Cap got arrested. He got taken to like a Senate building to be tried. There was a shooter somewhere. He got shot and he died. That's depressing. Itsuki? Captain America's still very much alive in my world. He hasn't died at all, and there was no Civil War. Wait a minute. The boys would then compare their typical knowledge amongst themselves, as all of them were from Japan. They would quickly learn that no one was on the same yen on their world. The currency was different in terms of who was leading at any given time. They were easily able to deduce that all of them came from an alternate world. And now I can explain to you which world they came from. Ren comes from a more classic version of the 616 universe, a universe where Captain America first returned in 1963. Cap in this world would die of old age around the mid-2010s, along with all the other heroes who existed during the 1963 portion. That means the 60s Spider-Man, Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, all of those characters. This is a world where they were never rebooted. They grew old through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and they died of old age or being killed off, things of that nature. Motoyasu comes from a different point in time, during the time of Marvel's original Civil War. In his world, Captain America dies via being shot and killed on his way to the trial. As you all know, he was killed by Peggy Carter, who was, I think it was Sharon Carter, who was the descendant of Peggy Carter, who was being mind controlled. Then finally, you have Itsuki, who comes from the Marvel Ultimate Universe. This is where Ultimate Captain America, Ultimate Iron Man, Ultimate Thor, where all the Ultimates exist. So yes, he technically comes from the universe where the original Miles Morales does exist. So that's why all three boys have a different concept of Captain America, because Captain America is very different across each world. One died of old age, one was killed, and one is still active. The three boys would then turn back to Steve, as they asked him, What's the last thing you remember? I went under in the water. Yeah, that's all I remember. The boys were able to deduce that this Steve came from right when he first went under. But this is insane. It means, technically speaking, he hasn't lived his life post-iceberg. So that means he doesn't have a future. I don't have a future? What do you mean? The best way to say it is this. We each come from a future in particular. A different future of your life. A life you haven't lived yet. Steve was basically able to learn that he went under in the ice and stayed there for some time. But given each boy's rendition of his life, it seemed like he stayed under for various periods of time. One had him under the ice for around 20 years, the other around 60 to 70, and the other one around 100. Of course, all of this was news to Steve, and even more so for him to figure out how he was going to get back home. But for now, he found himself in a new world that was facing its own catastrophe. And that good nature of his felt as though he needed to do something about it. As such, he decided he would help them out, believing that if they worked together and got this done quickly, then maybe he could find a way back home. Avoid any of these futures, at least anywhere he ends up fighting fellow heroes and dying. And if you're wondering which Captain America this is MCU Captain America we're talking about. The next day, the four would meet amongst the king, as he would have them form their various parties to go and build up their stats in preparation for the next wave. Out of everyone, the only person who was willing to party with the current S.H.I.E.L.D. hero was Princess Mine. Steve had no problem with this, and he was even given extra money as compensation. Of course, much to everyone's dismay, but no surprise, out of everyone, Steve was already at a level higher than everyone else. While everyone else was stuck at a level 1, Steve, just in terms of pure power and skill alone, was at a level 10, much to the king's shock. How could the S.H.I.E.L.D. hero already be at such a level? But Itsuki theorized it was probably because of the skills that Steve already had. I mean, the guy was literally a soldier. It wouldn't be as if they would expect anything less of him. As such, because they learned that they could not all travel together, the four would split and go their separate ways. Steve working with Mine, battling low-skill monsters to build up his stats. Of course, he didn't like the fact that he couldn't throw his shield, but it didn't really matter to him. He had the skills and the capabilities of taking down monsters in and of themselves. Mine was definitely impressed. He wasn't like anything that her father had described to her. Not someone to be taken lightly. As the day progressed, they would decide to stay in an inn for the night, with Steve offering for pay, food, everything. He was grateful for the princess's help. The fact that he was making such progress, he felt like this could be taken care of in no time, and the princess agreed. As he turned in for the night, Steve dreamed of his old life, his old world, wondering when he'd be able to go back home. He hadn't learned everything, but still, for what he had learned, he definitely lived an exciting life to say the least, not one for the faint of heart. And at the same time, there was still so much more for him to discover. However, if Steve thought that this was all going to be easy, he was in for a rude awakening. It happened the next morning. Soldiers came barging into Steve's room. They already had their spears drawn upon him. Steve was quickly able to disarm the soldiers. They weren't really capable of taking him down, but more and more just kept coming. Steve eventually made his way to the castle, trying to figure out why the king's men was trying to kill him. He saw Princess Mine, who was crying in the arms of Motoyasu, the three others looking back towards Steve, all of them disgusted. It's awful. It's awful what he tried to do to me, Lord Motoyasu. It's all right, mine. I guess we can tell which Steve this is. Yeah, at least ours had valor and dignity, not like this one, Itsuki would say. If we're looking for a future for this one, it's obvious that he's the bad one. I mean, think about it. We all come from a different universe. Whenever there's a good version of you, there's bound to be a bad one. And it looks like we had the misfortunes of being stuck with him. Stuck with? What are you guys talking about? I don't even know. You have the audacity to come back into my throne room. After the stunt you pulled. The king looked to Steve in disgust. For trying to force yourself upon my daughter. You deserve to die 1,000 deaths. But I didn't. I didn't do anything. Please, Your Highness, there has to be a misunderstanding. Unfortunately for Steve, he learned a cold and harsh lesson that day. It doesn't matter what world you go to. Just as there is the potential for good in everyone, there is also the potential for great evil. The liar, the slanderer, that is who Steve had brought into his fold. He was stripped of everything he was given by the king, left with nothing. For Steve, he almost didn't want to believe it. Was fate punishing him? What had he done wrong? All he had ever done was spend his entire life trying to do the right thing, in spite of everyone that put him down. Now he gets sent to another world against his will, and this happens to him? He couldn't believe it. At that point, he was just ready to leave then. I mean, what did this have to do with him? He didn't ask to be brought here, to be put on trial for something he didn't do. Where did it go wrong? He started thinking back to that day. That day that he jumped on that damn grenade. All those other guys, they looked down on him. They didn't even want him there. The commanding officer didn't even want him there. What if that grenade had been real? He would have died. Died for nothing. It never really dawned on Steve the type of life he lived up until now. He tried to live a selfless life of valor. And this is what he got for it. This was his reward. To be branded as an abuser, a criminal. It made Steve bring everything he had ever done into question. Had he even made the right decisions? If the decisions were going to bring him here, to put him through everything it put him through, to lose everything he ever loved, then perhaps it was a mistake. Why did he have to be the bigger man? To put up with all the wrongs when no one else wanted to? Steve came from a time when people loved talking a big game, yet they couldn't back up those words with action. Those were the type of people he hated the most. And what was worse was that everyone looked down on him, judging him without any rhyme or reason, all on the words of lies. While surrounded, Steve looked to the king. These waves of catastrophe, we beat them, then what? Then you may return home if you wish. For you, it will be the moment the incursions are over. Fine. I'll fight the incursions. And when it's done, I'm going home. And don't ever think of bringing me back here ever again. Very well, I agree to those terms. But know this, the country is being made aware of your crimes. No matter where you go, no matter where you squirm to, the people will know the truth about who and what you truly are. You devil of the shield. Steve walked away from the palace in disgrace. The people in the streets who were only just cheering for him a day ago turned their eyes in scorn towards him. It was definitely the reverse of what he experienced back at home. The idea of everyone discrediting his moral, his merit, and his worth. But for Steve, none of that really mattered. Whether they liked it or not, and whether he liked it or not, he was one of the only four capable of protecting them from the incursions. Another responsibility thrown on his shoulders. Another burden to bear. And he had already taken on so many, what was one more? But he didn't have to be happy about it. He didn't have to smile. He didn't have to dance like an asinine monkey. He didn't have to pander and pretend. No. It was all about business. Getting this done and going home. That was the only thing that mattered. Screw the king. Screw this kingdom. Screw whatever they wanted to believe, those boys, and whatever future they thought he held. No one decided his future. His was his alone. For Steve, he had no problem working on his own, fending off against the monsters. He had no difficulties in that. Making a party of his own was next to impossible. Finding those that would fight beside him, impossible. No one dared look in his direction, and for the few that did, it was either to get one over on him or to try to kick him while he was down. He avoided the main part of the capital of the kingdom, instead choosing to stick to the outskirts. Of course, much, or maybe not to his surprise, you'll always find a seedy underbelly in any world you go to. Why would that be any different? It all happened on a fateful night while Steve was walking through the streets alone. When a round, larger individual, short and stubby, came waddling towards him. I see that look in your eyes. What look would that be? A man who searches for the fine beauty amongst the refuse. You do not stick or conform to the daily norms like everyone else. You and I are a lot alike. What are you trying to sell me? Sell you? You look like a wannabe con man to me. You're obviously trying to peddle something. Something that you probably wouldn't want the authorities to know about. What is it? You just seem to be someone who needs company. And based on those ruffians who tried to mess with you just a while ago, it's obvious that finding those whom you can trust is definitely in short supply. What you need is someone that's loyal, someone that won't betray you, someone who you'll have their unyielding trust. I can give it to you. And how could you possibly give me that? Won't you follow me, shield hero? Much to his chagrin, Steve followed the slave trader. Of course, discovering what he did for a living made him absolutely repulsed. Steve never agreed with the form of slavery. He wouldn't have agreed to it in his own world, and he damn sure didn't agree to it here. Seeing these beasts tied in cages, ravenous and monstrous humanoids. But then he saw one, a demi-human girl. She was sick. Steve's blood began to boil as he grabbed the fat slave trader by the collar. You have a little girl tied in that cage. What the hell is wrong with you? I'm sorry, Shield Hero. Perhaps you're not used to things being like this wherever you're from. But in this world, if it can be sold, it will be sold. I have done nothing wrong. In this country, this being has no rights. Everyone has a right to life, you piece of... I should kill you. I get that a lot. But if you kill me now, you'll only be adding more so to your crimes. Your ledger is already red enough. How much more redder can it be? Charge, no charge, it makes no difference. I've been called everything in the book. What's one more? The girl would cough once again, catching Steve's attention. She wasn't in any condition, and what was worse, there was sealing magic around the cages. He couldn't just break it free even if he wanted to. Steve looked into his coin pouch to see how much he had. Is this enough to cover her? Oh yes, more than enough. I can even have a slave crest already. I don't need it. What? But don't you want absolute loyalty? Those who will never betray you. If you don't give her the crest, she'll run on you the first chance. It doesn't matter to me. I want her free from that cage now. So take it. Steve shoved the coin pouch into the man. Very well then. As you wish. With a snap of his finger, the cage door was opened. The small girl slowly crawling out as Steve helped her. You'll be all right. I'm gonna take care of you. Come on, let's get out of here. The girl said nothing but held on to him as they both walked out of the slave trader's hut. Steve would find a small inn. Thankfully, there was a doctor that was staying there. He was on retainer in case any of the staff or any of the guests had any sort of emergency. Steve didn't have much, but thankfully, the doctor didn't really require it. What Steve did have, though, was some abilities he had gained along the way. Even if it was only for a short time, the princess mind, she still had some usefulness to Steve. At the very least, it was thanks to her efforts, he learned that by feeding material to his shield, he could gain new ones and special abilities that came with them. Outside of the standard shield, he also gained the leaf shield that gave him the ability to give fine quality to plants and other vegetation. As such, he always carried quality herbs with him and other ingredients everywhere he went. The doctor was able to use this and create a remedy for the girl's sickness. It's a good thing you had this on you. I believe she'll be able to make a recovery, but for now, she just needs rest. Steve sat by the small girl's bedside. She had what appeared to be the ears of a raccoon and a raccoon's tail. It was definitely fascinating to say the least, but yet even still, why would someone sell her away? Who could do such a thing? Steve had half a mind to go back and kill that slave trader, but for now he had to focus his attentions on where it was needed. He took care of the girl. Even though it took about a week for her to recover, a week he could have spent grinding and getting stronger, he looked after her. By the time she awoke, she found herself in a nice warm bed with hot meals on the ready. The few times she woke up, she remembered the kind man feeding her and letting her rest. But now she finally had awoken and Steve was sleeping in a chair right beside her. He slowly rubbed his eyes as the early morning sun had come through the window. Well, it seems like you're finally awake. That's a relief. It seems like the fever's finally broken through. Yes. Thank you. It's fine. Call me Steve. Steve. Yes, do you have a name? Raftalia. Raftalia. Nice to meet you, Raftalia. I'll be honest. I don't know anything about you or know where you come from, but thank you. Huh? You saved me. Thank you. Those were the last words Steve thought he would hear. But looking into her eyes, seeing the trust that she had in him, the trust in the one that saved her from the life she lived, it was in that moment for Steve, he forgot about everything. Yes, even in a world full of liars, betrayers, slanderers, thieves, crooks, murderers, scumbags, and all of the like, it was moments like these where Steve reminded himself of why he did what he did. He didn't do it for the glory, for the honor, for the fame, for the adulation. He did it because there were those that couldn't protect themselves. And he was the one that stood up for them. It's why he took up the shield. It's why he never gave up. It's why he always stood for what was right, even when no one else would. It's why he jumped on that grenade. It's why he went back to save Bucky. It's why he crashed that plane. Because he cared for those more than he cared for himself. He put the needs of others ahead of himself, no matter how bad the situation got. Those were the ideals that he stuck to. Those were the ideals that made him who he was. And despite everything he had gone through, he knew that deep down, he would not allow these circumstances to change who he was. It didn't matter what the world thought of him. It didn't matter what they wanted to label him, what they wanted to call him. They could believe whatever they wanted. What mattered was that there was still evil. There was evil in every world. And it was his job to face it head on. No matter what anyone else said, above all things, he would be what the world needed him to be. He would be a hero. This concludes The Rising of the Shield Hero, The Man Out of Time. What if Captain America was a shield hero? Season 1, Part 1. As always, if you enjoyed today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned tomorrow morning as we'll be continuing with The Rising of the Shield Hero, Man Out of Time. What if Captain America was the Shield Hero? Season 1, Part 2. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.